Let's look at a few key elements in promoting social inclusion now. A slightly wordy slide here, which I'll allow you to look through in a bit more detail. So, help socially excluded people and communities overcome inequality and disadvantage arising as a result of the circumstances an individual is born into or as a result of his or her own particular circumstances. I think that captures the areas in which we've talked about on the previous slide quite nicely. Another element in promoting social inclusion, promoting equality of opportunities. Promoting social inclusion usually includes promoting equal opportunities for those who are excluded and eliminating discrimination. And so that there is clearly a link between promoting social inclusion and promoting equality and diversity. Therefore, social inclusion work may be carried out as a way of furthering the promotion of equality and diversity. That notion of equality and diversity, a common thread throughout that slide. So some of the key words that have popped out on that slide for me, which I've highlighted in bold here, principles, I suppose, to carry through on this notion of social inclusion. Looking to help groups. It's about inequality, disadvantage on the negative side, I suppose. Potentially they're born into it, so it's through no fault of their own, or particular circumstances they've just happened upon or they find themselves in. And then the positive side. So that's the negative side of social inclusion. The positive side, what are we going to do about it? So essentially, as an organisation, we need to be, or a society, we need to promote equality. We need to provide equal opportunities to all groups that find themselves excluded and also need to eliminate discrimination. So eradicate any form of discrimination. And that comes strongly through promotion of equality and diversity. And we'll look later on in this session about ways in which organisations do this in a formal capacity. In addressing the area of social exclusion, Hilton and Totten say, inequality is a significant cause of social exclusion, whereby individuals or communities are unable for a variety of reasons to partake with others. In sport development, unless there is recognition of the needs and aspirations of diverse people in society and among client groups, providers will continue to maintain inequalities in society. So Hilton and Totten now is really starting to bring in the notion of sport development and the way in which it can address this area of social exclusion. Okay, another task for you now. You now have a baseline understanding of social exclusion, social inclusion, and the benefits of sport for all. In small groups or on your own, discuss the following 4 interpretations of sport for all and inclusion. Select which one you most agree with. If you're working in small groups, engage in constructive discussion to defend your choice. If working on your own, list 2 live examples that demonstrate the theory and your reason for that selection of that particular interpretation. So what are the interpretations? First of all, we've got functionalist. In a maturing society, equity and inclusion are ultimately and inevitably achievable. Historical inequalities in sport are gradually eroded. Social consensus necessitates inclusion. The social system is committed to a project of inclusion. Exclusion is dysfunctional and undesirable. The second interpretation is neo-Marxist. So sport for all is unlikely to happen against the backdrop of a capitalist society. So just to pause there, capitalism is an economic system in which investment in and ownership of the means of production distribution and exchange of wealth is made and maintained chiefly by private individuals or corporations, especially as contrasted to cooperatively or state-owned means of wealth. In short, capitalism, a small group of rich companies dominating society, which is based on a competition and inequality. Sport reflects and reinforces this. Power struggles in sport mirror those in society. Think of the top four in the Premier League, for example. Sport is a site of cultural struggle. This struggle includes the vested political and commercial interests in the dominant culture, the diverse self-interests of communities, and the emancipatory interests of the oppressed. Emancipatory meaning to free and to free from oppression. The need to redistribute opportunity is paramount to create a fairer society. So that's neo-Marxist interpretation. The third interpretation is feminist. In recent years, there has been partial success in terms of addressing numerical inequalities in participation, but women are still institutionally excluded from the governance of sport. Ultimately, the quality of women's and men's experiences in sport is still vastly unequal. The culture of sport is still male-dominated. Gender equity in sport is impossible in the context of a broader patriarchal society. Postmodernist is the final interpretation within this section. And this means concepts such as sports equality and social inclusion are outmoded. There is nothing objectively fixed to determine inclusion or exclusion. Society is increasingly influenced by global processes which lead to the redundancy of traditional boundaries, social structures and inequalities. Class, gender and ethnic boundaries are collapsing. Lifestyle and identity are increasingly individualized and self-determined through consumption like sport. Now, quite a lot of information for you there to process. However, let's revisit that task that I want you to do. So in small groups or on your own, discuss those four interpretations of sport for all and inclusion. I'd like you to pick the one that you feel most resonates with your feelings about social exclusion and social inclusion in sport for all. Then I want you to think of some examples. I already produced one example, didn't I? Within the neo-Marxist interpretation about a football example being the Chelseas, the Manchester Cities and the top level clubs dominating the market for top class players and it not being redistributed. However, a counter argument to that might be in America, where the NFL have a draft system whereby players are distributed evenly. So if you think of an example to back your interpretation up in your argument, if somebody's discussing with you, try and think of a counter argument, just like I did. So if you're defending neo-Marxist, it might be top four clubs, but actually your counter argument, you might say, well, actually there's a draft system that works really well in America. Okay, so it's over to you and good luck.